All right, hello, and welcome back to the Chase Thomas podcast. Taping this on a Thursday afternoon here from Knoxville, Tennessee, Everything School HQ. Also here, my good friend, fellow University of Tennessee alumni. We can both now officially say that the first time on this very program, two alums in the house for the Vols. And what did you hear that? Oh, it's another Tennessee miss from deep. Will Warren, another clank from the Tennessee Volunteers as we get started here. How are you, sir?
Good. I had a bit and then I lost it. And that's just how it goes this time of year. I'm trying to remember what my joke was. It's that, Joe Milton can throw his little orange 100 yards or whatever. But whenever he's ready to compare who can throw a Honeycrisp apple farther, let's get in the office, Joe.
How was the apple status? I remember you got a bunch of apples. Wasn't it around this time a year or two ago?
Or my beloved apple truck did come down from Michigan, or from West Michigan this year to deliver, and so I held myself with some restraint this year. I got just a 10-pound box this year compared to the 20-pounder last year, because we had apples for like 6 weeks in the fridge. This year they were gone in about 3. But
how many apples is 10 pounds roughly?
Really depends on your variety. This is actually deviating into some territory I didn't expect to cover. But, if you're getting those Macintoshes, maybe the Galas that are a little smaller, you can probably squeeze out like 3 to a pound, I would say. So like if you went to Kroger, picked out a couple Honeycrisp or like the bigger ones, you're probably getting to a pound or not a little above right there. So the smaller ones, obviously you can get more for your value, but it's going to end up being the same amount of apple regardless. So.
Okay, I like it. Are you a peanut butter apple person, or do you just or do you cut them up, or you just bite into the apple?
Just bite into the apple. Occasionally, very occasionally, I'll do the little caramel dip thing, which is very good, I would admit. But it's a lot of sugar, and I don't really I don't feel great after I eat a lot of sugar, so I try and stay away from it. This is a very old man thing to say, but it's true.
Hey, we're both in our. I'm in my 30s. Are you in your 30s yet?
I'm edging to my 30s. I'm close to it. One more year.
Yeah, once you're married and settled in and working full time and doing all that, it's just 30s and late 20s are basically the same. We're basically on the same timeline. Well, we're washed men here in East Tennessee. What was the coolest thing you got for Christmas, or got somebody else for Christmas this year, Will?
Coolest thing I got for Christmas, I got this desk via my mom. I put it together yesterday. Very exciting. Little L-shaped, which I've never owned before. My amazing wife got me a massage gun, but unfortunately the battery in it appears to have broken after one use, so we have to go exchange it. But still a wonderful gift to get. I love massage guns, so
this is hilarious, Will. My wife and I both got massage guns for Christmas from other people. Yeah, we both have one now that we're just gonna, I guess, another sign that we're washed in our 30s. We're just gonna take turns hitting each other with the massage gun. But I see it all over. I haven't used it because I see it over at the PT facility that I go to for my foot, and I see people doing it, but they've not done that to me yet. I've never gotten the foot beater, whatever. Never gotten it.
My grandfather had, and still does. I gotta go take it from his house. He had one of it's not a gun, but it's like a foot massager that you can turn on, and it's heated, and you just run it under your computer desk. And whenever they're like a year ago, I used it, and I was like, I cannot believe I mean, if I did this all day, I think I'd be the happiest person alive. Yeah. So, I mean, really good quirks of living in 2022, I suppose.
What's not really good is the Kentucky Wildcats. Well, we have to start here. We have to start with Tshiebwe Wheeler maybe not being the right guy for Kentucky. You sent me that quote from a coach openly talking about whether or not Tshiebwe Wheeler is the right fit for this Kentucky team, if he's helping them. They go down to Missouri to open SEC play on Wednesday. Man, what's going on with Kentucky, and how concerned are you with Kentucky just really not being very good at all this year?
Honestly, I mean, we could even go further. Missouri blew these guys out. it's weird to say this about a game Kentucky lost by 14, but I mean, I'm sure you watched it. That 14 doesn't feel representative of the result. That felt like a 20 to 25 point loss. I'm very alarmed by what they've got going on because, it was kind of weird, when we were talking about his name is Mitch Barnhart, right? Their athletic director. When we were talking about his comments about football school versus basketball school back in the summer, spring, whenever that whole debacle happened, we were kind of both like, yeah, if you want to get pissed at Cal, you can get pissed at Cal, but you're not going to get anybody better. And I think we were both kind of counting on them, just kind of like, yeah, the St. Peter's thing happened, but they're going to be like top 10 or whatever again. And this is Kentucky. I really hesitate to hammer the nail in the coffin on Kentucky before they actually lose in the NCAA tournament, just because they've kind of earned that level of respect and, patience. But, I mean, I have a hard time naming, aside from the obvious COVID year, a November and December that felt less successful for UK. Because, so if you go and look at it right now, what would you say is their best win? Because, I mean, it's probably Michigan.
I was going to say, that makes the most sense.
It's either Michigan or likely Ivy League winner Yale. And I don't think Michigan's making the tournament. And Yale is probably a 12 seed. So, I mean, and it's not like Kentucky didn't schedule well, right? Like, they had some marquee opponents, but the Michigan State double overtime loss looked a lot better a month ago before Michigan State sort of revealed themselves to be not good. The Gonzaga road loss, you can excuse that, but you really needed to get one at some point. And so you go 0 on MSU, Gonzaga, UCLA. You can't control that Michigan came in under expectation. I get that. But despite all of that, you've got all these other pretty unimpressive performances littered in. I mean, you remember the Bellarmine game where they were trailing with 12 minutes to go. They struggled mightily against Yale for a while. Florida A&M came out and put up 1.15 points per possession on Kentucky. That is unacceptable. And so it all kind of led to, my man, I don't know if it's, I'm never sure of the pronunciation here. It's either Jordan Majewski or Jordan Majewski, and I'm probably thinking it's Majewski. Amazing basketball writer, staring at the floorboards.wordpress.com if you're unfamiliar. He used to do stuff for Action Network. But he said yesterday, I've watched several games with both teams, and Missouri just looks like the much more complete team right now. And how absolutely insane is that to say about, Missouri, a team that basically overhauled their entire roster, replenished it with mid-majors, had a new coach, really limited time to get this thing rolling. And they look like much more complete, much more confident, and much more correctly managed and put together than a Kentucky team with like a lottery pick on it, Case and Wallace, the returning player of the year in Oscar Tshiebwe, 20-point mid-major scorer in Antonio Reeves, breakout candidate supposedly, and Jacob Toppin. I mean, you want to believe that the turnaround is coming, right? Like eventually Kentucky's going to lock into place. I don't want to believe personally, but generally don't want to put the nail in the coffin too early. But CJ Frederick got hurt last night. CJ Frederick, I mean, not like a great player necessarily, but a shooter and something Kentucky needs. Like, you're looking at a roster, they are still trying to figure out who they want to play. Jacob Toppin has been a god-awful shooter this year, 14% from deep. Tshiebwe cannot shoot. So in 2022, why would you play Toppin and Tshiebwe together? You can't have multiple non-shooters on the court at the same time. If Frederick is gone, I mean, they were playing Thero, whatever it is, last night. It was like, okay, maybe this works, but why are you pulling this guy out of the mothball closet on December 28th? So I don't know. I mean, I've been fooled before. In the 2017-18 year where UK won the SEC title when they beat UT, I was thinking at that New Year's Eve break, basically, after they lost to UCLA, this is not a good team. Kevin Knox is not good. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is the one guy on this team that seems like he can do anything. PJ Washington hasn't figured it out yet. And they ended up getting it together, but it's strange to me watching them play and seeing Tshiebwe has come in well under what he was a year ago. And whether that's teams adjusting to that style, forcing the ball out of his hands and making others take shots. He's getting doubled a lot more, I've noticed. And Tennessee seemed to have started that trend a little bit last year, and St. Peter's as well. Um, the plan is just like, if you force a non-Tshiebwe player to beat you, you're either, counting on Case and Wallace not having a supernova game, that's not going to happen all the time, or that one of the role players turns up, which has happened infrequently. So I don't know, man. This is the lowest I felt on a Kentucky team, aside from the COVID year, probably since that Nerlens Noel squad. And I don't know. You look for the turnaround, and it can happen, but it just seems so far away right now. And it's weird. They're 13th in KenPom, but they don't look like 13th, do they?
No, this looks like a one and done in the tournament. Like, this does not feel like a deep tournament run type of team. And I wonder, too, because the talent, it's not a talent thing. And they have a bunch of talent coming in next year's class, too, that you're like, all right, it's not a talent thing. It's not even a scheme thing, because, like, they've adjusted a lot. They're just not playing collectively in a way that gives you any hope if you're a Kentucky fan, where you're like, this is just a bunch of talented pieces that aren't working. And that's like the coach's job, is to figure out a way to do this. It is Rick Barnes' job to figure out a way to scrape out wins when Josiah Jordan-James is not available. Like, you just have to adapt and win these games, not get blown out by Mizzou to start SEC play. Like, that's just unacceptable for Kentucky. I don't know. I've started to think, I'm like, if they did move on from Cal after this year, if they got bounced in the first round again, in embarrassing fashion, I think Kentucky is one of a couple jobs where the expectations can be absolutely insane. Like, I think it's okay that they can still do that.
And I think that's fine, largely. I mean, they have the history. They're a blue blood. Not only are you a historic blue blood, you've remained a blue blood over the last 25 years. Like, you can't say the same about Indiana, for example, or really UCLA for a large chunk of that time, even though they're back on top now.
Can I throw the two names who I think that they'll target if they do?
Yeah, so Kenny Payne is one.
Well, speaking of, we get the Kenny Payne versus Calipari game on New Year's Eve. They play at noon on Saturday.
Thank God that there are other things happening. That's all I'll say. No one should be watching that game.
Which is sad, because I want a reason to watch Louisville, Kentucky. That should be a fun, interesting game. That should be a fun atmosphere, and it's just not. It's gonna be slop. My gut tells me it's gonna be like either Nate Oates or Bruce Pearl. If they, like, one of those two are gonna look at it and go, we've maximized what we can do at our Alabama schools, and give us Kentucky resources, and we can be perennial just title contenders.
Nate, yes. Bruce, no.
Nate's the one I picked. Like, I think Nate Oates is the next Kentucky coach.
See, I don't know if it'll be Oates, but I mean, you really do look at that job as, like, basically nobody under 60 is off limits. I mean, like, really, you can basically really, like, Kelvin Sampson's not going to take it. Barnes wouldn't take it. And probably, like, Bill Self wouldn't take that job.
No. And
then beyond that, I mean, it really is like a huge pile of questions. Like, I mean, like, would Dan Hurley say yes? I would kind of think so.
Yeah.
Would Mick Cronin say yes?
Apologies to the UConn fans. Get Will Warren. UConn's good again for the first time in a decade, and Will's like, let me take your coach away. Let me immediately.
No, Dan Hurley's staying there for a while for sure. But I mean, like, if Kentucky called, you're at least listening. That's really the thing.
Yeah. Tennessee, they survived against Ole Miss on Wednesday night. Ole Miss got out to an early lead where you're like, oh God, this is going to be one of those nights where it was one of those nights where Tennessee could not score at all. 3 total threes in this one. The nice thing was Ole Miss also couldn't shoot, so that was nice. And part of that was Tennessee putting the clamps, but also just the talent for the Rebs just not on the same level. A big game from Jonas Aidoo, which they needed in a big way. I'm concerned that I'm, like, listening to other Tennessee writers talk about what Triple J, and you said, we were texting, and I've just been saying, I'm like, I think we're inching closer and closer to Triple J not playing again this season, that they're just going to shut him down, where it's like, at some point you just have to be like, this man is never going to be 100% ready to go, or trust the knee, where he's still thinking draft and stuff like that, and you don't want to tear your ACL or damage it because of just how careful it seems like no matter what they're going to have to be with James all year long. It seems like they're going to have to be extremely careful with his knee. And look, the Clippers do it every year with Kawhi Leonard. They have to be extremely careful. So maybe we get that with Josiah Jordan-James, where it's like you're on a minutes restriction every night, no matter what. For this season, you don't play twice in 1 week or something. I don't know. But the fact that he was not available again, even though he was going through warm-ups and all that kind of stuff, where you're like, oh, he's going to play. And then it's like, nope, Josiah Jordan-James did not play. It's clear that there is such a drop-off offensively when this man is not in the rotation versus when he's not. And Vescovi had a great game. I think he finished with 22 in this one. But, man, it's still – Julian Phillips is not comfortable enough to just kind of take charge at this point. I mean, he's a true freshman in that, but 4 points from him. They're going to play bigger, which scares me a lot too, is Barnes without Triple J. I mean, small balls out the window. For a lot of this, and we're just going to try and out physical you. And that is going to be fine for the majority of SEC play. It's going to win a lot of games, but man, I've seen this movie before come tournament time, and it just kind of scares me that that's kind of where they're headed right now. But we have all the time in the world to get to how Tennessee will fare in March. What are your strong takeaways from opening night in SEC play?
I think everybody sucked except for Alabama. I mean, honestly. Well, I guess Missouri. Sorry, Missouri had a great night, and that's like really good for them. But like, I don't know. I think last night's results are pretty emblematic of what it just always has been in SEC play, and generally most major conferences, where it's like, as long as your opponent doesn't truly like historically suck, like Georgia last year or South Carolina this season, it's going to be tough to win on the road. Conference play on the road is difficult for a reason. Nobody comes out unblemished. Nobody comes out looking like roses all the time. Tennessee didn't shoot well. You know, Vescovi went 3 for 7. Everybody else went 0 for 8 from deep. But Tennessee got to the rim a lot, which I was really pleased with. They really, I mean, after the first 10 minutes, I don't think they took many bad mid-range shots. Ole Miss is a team that hammers the rim more than I think any other SEC squad, and they only got 15 attempts at the rim and went 7 for 15. And that's in a game where like Waka barely played at all. You know, Euros was horrendous, and I mean, more or less, Tennessee won the 7-man rotation for the entire second half. So I thought, that's a pretty impressive performance given the circumstances. Given that James did warm up, for the record, we should note that he's been fully warming up. For the last 2 games. So I think that means like people are starting to become more optimistic he will play soon when I ask around. It's just a matter of when. The problem, of course, is like Tennessee seems really committed, and I think Barnes is going to have to change this soon, to starting games with both Ziegler on the bench and Plavsic in the lineup. I think you can do one of those 2 things, preferably Ziegler off the bench. You cannot do both. Because when you do both, that means you're starting out a lineup where it's either, Vescovi or Key is your main ball handler, Phillips, a guy who's still kind of figuring out his game, Kamwa, who it's like, I feel like Olivier Kamwa, who has gotten a lot better this year, never has started a game well, like ever. He is the ultimate, like, runs the first mile at half speed to get into, like, the mood to go. That's his thing. And then you have Euros out there who was awful in last night's game and has remained awful for a while. I think Tennessee's path forward is interesting because, I mean, eventually they will hit threes. At the same time last year's team was at 32.6% from deep. This year's team, 32.3%. Last year's team ended up being one of the hottest shooting teams in the nation over the final 2 months. So I think that's still going to come. But a lot of these errors could be avoided by, you got to give Adu more minutes, right? I think he has to be playing no less than 20 a night, if not 25. You probably need to up Meshach's minutes somehow even more because he's so dominant defensively. And you have to consider, and I don't love saying it, but you have to consider maybe moving Phillips to the bench for a little bit while he figures this out. I don't know that they will do that, but he's got to become more efficient offensively, straight up. He's great at getting to the free throw line, and everything else is just a huge question mark at this point.
I don't think he ever put Ziegler back in. I think based on him going publicly after Euros, in a way where he's like, there's no place for that. He can't be doing that. And this was after the Arizona game. which I will say what got overlooked, the pearl clutching after Euros's tee, that was a weak technical.
Well, yeah, but
That was a weak one, and he got mad, and he kind of bumped him and got in his face. But I'm like, that's never getting called in the NBA. That is one of those where it was just an overzealous ref, and I was like, I don't look. We can have our Euros opinions and like his fiery demeanor being too much sometimes, but I was like, I don't think that was an example of it. I don't think that really rubbed me the wrong way, because he's having to, like, especially with those two specifically, the two bigs for Arizona, with the amount of success that they have had to this point this year, you need Euros just kind of being that instigator in a way where you're trying to get in their heads a little bit. You're trying to show that it's not going to be easy for you. You kind of attack Oscar Tshiebwe the same kind of way with your physicality. And what was interesting to me, and when you're talking about moving Euros to the bench, and because I don't think Barnes has ever put Ziegler back in the starting lineup. I don't think that's happening.
Which I think that's fine. As long as Ziegler is playing 30 minutes a game anyway, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
But it's a deal of you can do one, but you can't do both. You can't both have Ziegler on the bench and Euros on the court, because your lineups offensively are just going to be so much worse.
But I also don't think you could go with Idu either. I don't think he solves it if you start him at the 5 with Kamwa and Ziegler on the bench. I don't think he really fits that mold. I don't know who would you start if you have to keep Ziegler off the bench. Who's the 5 that you replace Euros with?
You can make an argument for
Meshack?
I think Meshack. It could be that you start Kamwa at the 5 and start small, and try that for a game or two, see if it works. If it doesn't, you don't have to commit to it forever. And Rick Barnes generally does figure these things out by March. It's just this is a pattern where it's like, he is a great coach, but it's like the 2018-19 team continuing to start Yves Pons for 15 games after that should not have been happening. So I think there's going to be a change. It's probably going to be Euros to the bench, given yesterday's comments about giving Adu more first team reps. But as usual, I think it's just like Tennessee's evaluation as a team. I think they're great. I think they're a top 5 team, but the full evaluation still remains incomplete until you know one way or the other for sure what is going to happen with Josiah Jordan-James.
Yeah, but we'll see ultimately what happens there. I do think it was interesting. Like, I had Jay Billis on yesterday, and we were talking about Tennessee for a little bit. And one of the things he said that I hadn't really considered, and it's just like, this is something that, like, Tennessee's floor is so high naturally because the way college basketball is officiated now, Tennessee is one of the biggest benefactors, because Tennessee is so physical night in, night out that they're going to win a lot of games no matter what, because this defense is so locked in and they're so physical, because this is now a physical game where the whistles are not as strong, and Tennessee is going to get away with a lot of aggressive defense, and that is sustainable year over year. But what it doesn't mean is like the offense, like his thing was like, you watch them, it's not like the scheme's an issue. They're taking a lot more threes this year. He's just like, they just don't have the shooters. Like, it's just like, I don't know what you do if you're Rick Barnes, where you're like, I'm not certain that the guys you have are going to be good enough to have like a top 10, top 15 offensively. Like, they're there defensively. I don't know. What do you think of that?
I would disagree that Tennessee doesn't have shooters. I mean,
well,
one of the best one is sitting out right now. But
yeah.
Well, maybe Vescovi's better. But I mean, like, Vescovi shot 41% from 3 last year. Ziegler was a 40% plus shooter in high school. Phillips, 38. I mean, Olivier Kamwa hit 45% of his threes a year ago. They have shooters. They're just, I mean, shooting variance is a real thing, whether talking heads want to admit it or not. And Tennessee's kind of seen the bad side of that on offense and the tremendous side of it on defense. No team is going to hold everybody to 21% from deep for a year. That, more than anything, kind of explains the results.
Yeah. And I think we're already seeing Vescovi turn around a little bit, and I think he's going to be the one I think Tennessee has to, and I'm sure Barnes knows this, is Tyreek Key has to be a bigger player. Like, he has, like, that's maybe what flips this season from being like, oh, Tennessee can make a deeper run because Tyreek Key is going to be more of the scorer that he was at Indiana State, and he gets comfortable enough by March that he's someone they can count on for 15 to 20 a night when they need it.
My one take on him, and then we'll move on. I think the worst thing that ever could have happened to him was the Gonzaga exhibition game where he scored 26. Because I think, like, I mean, going into the season, I think everybody's expectations for Key were really reasonable. Where it's just like, okay, if this guy's like a solid seventh man, that's what we want. And then he goes out and scores 26 against Gonzaga, and you're like, oh, this guy's going to score 18 a game. And the truth is probably somewhere in between 18 a game and seventh or eighth man.
Yeah.
And so I still think he can provide like low end starter level value. But I agree. He's
Tennessee
just
was counting on more
than
that.
Got to shoot more. I mean, he is and I like Kamwa, I guess, but you think about it, he is the only player on the roster where when he takes a mid range jumper, you're like, that's fine. Not upset about that. Everybody else, you're like, could you just take a three instead or go to the rim?
Justin Moore might be back soon. Tore his Achilles, obviously, last year. He'll be back at some point this season, which would be a big boost for Villanova. What do you make of the potential of a Justin Moore return for Villanova this year? They just lost to UConn 74-66. Villanova obviously not having the type of year many would hoped coming in to the season. They beat St. John's for Neptune's first Big East victory a few days ago. I don't know. I don't know what to make of Villanova, and I don't know if a late season Justin Moore return actually changes what they can be this year. What do you think?
I think it kind of does. I mean, I would be a big help. I don't think it would make them into the Villanova I expected preseason, but they would be better. I mean, I wasn't ready to quit on Villanova at 2-5. I think there's still life in there. They've played really well the last few games. That St. John's one was solid. I honestly was even more impressed with how they played against UConn despite shooting poorly from deep. They had a solid defensive game. I wasn't taken aback by it or anything, but I was like, you know what, Villanova, there's still some life in there. There's still some good stuff they can do. It's a bad defense, no rim protection at all, bad at rebounding. The Pats' heads are falling off. But it's still Villanova in the sense like they're capable of having great shooting nights. They still never turn the ball over. And anytime you can add back Justin Moore to the equation, I think that's good. Ken Pom has them finishing tied for fifth in the Big East. But the pack from, so there's kind of like the main packs in the Big East this year, I'd say it's like four tiers. You got UConn, who's the runaway number one. You got that second tier group of contenders who are probably going to constitute the rest of the first four in Marquette, Xavier, Creighton. And then you've kind of got the questions pack where it's like there's Villanova, there's Providence, there's St. John's, there's Seton Hall, there's Butler. These are all like solid to good teams who have giant flaws, but on the right night could probably beat anyone from that second pack, and on the really great night could potentially beat UConn. Villanova kind of belongs in that group to me where it's like they could break loose and, you know, sort of establish themselves among that group. Like you still have Eric Dixon, you still have Caleb Daniels, both of whom are having solid years. I don't know. I'm just not ready to give up on them. And once it fully flips to Big East play, anything really can happen.
For sure. And we should also mention they beat a good Marquette team yesterday.
Yes.
So I think there is some reason for optimism. I think Neptune, will be okay here at Villanova. Somebody that I don't think is going to be okay, and I think Arkansas is in a little trouble here with Smith being out for the foreseeable future. They've been destroyed with the injury bug to this point this year. I think you and I were on this where it's like they're probably the most talented SEC team coming into this year. It just seems like injuries are going to define this 2022-2023 Arkansas team. Do you still think that they can be the best in the SEC, or do you think too much is piled up here where you're like, I don't think they can do it with their personnel they have available?
The path to them winning the SEC, it's kind of difficult to envision in the sense of, and honestly, I hate to be rude, but this is one of the least watchable teams in America, so it's already a really bad outcome for them to lose Trevon Brazile and then to lose Nick. Like, I don't know if Nick Smith is fully lost, but that kind of seems to be the assumption.
Yeah.
So
he looks like a lottery guy. I think.
There's not really much gained by playing for him, right?
No.
So John Fendler, who's this betting guy on Twitter, he shares a lot of shot quality data from time to time. I'm going to read a couple stats off for you. First two are from Shot Quality.
Mm-hmm.
Arkansas, 304th in offensive spacing, 320th in shot making. This data is from Synergy. They are in the first percentile, like bottom 1 percentile of all college basketball teams in jumper usage, ninth percentile in jumper field goal percentage. That's why I can't take them seriously. So, I mean, like, yeah, Tennessee doesn't look very fun a lot of times, but they are capable of having a great shooting night. They're unafraid to shoot is the thing. Like, Tennessee might miss 12 of their 15 threes, but they're going to shoot. They're not going to be afraid of taking them. It leads to higher variance, but it gives you a greater chance of a lot of shots going in. Arkansas, by that same token, because they don't take threes and because they don't shoot jumpers, you might have like a higher bad offensive floor, so to speak, but your offensive ceiling is so limited that there's not much you can do against better teams. So Arkansas knows they can't shoot. They only take 27% of their shots from three, which is one of the lowest rates in all of America. Everyone who plays Arkansas knows they can't shoot. They face more zone defenses than 95% of college teams do. LSU, so this is an example from last night's game. LSU, 9 possessions of zone all season. They ran zone 25% of the time in their 3-point win over Arkansas in a game where Arkansas shot horribly. And it's because Arkansas' zone offense is in the 18th percentile in efficiency. What I'm saying is like the path for them to win the SEC is just like you have to hope that the game reverts to 2009 and you can win a bunch of like 55 to 52 games. You have to hope you got the freaking TF 1000 on your court every night and the other opponent has never shot that ball before. I mean, if they had Nick Smith, would it be better? Likely. If they had Brazil, would it be better? Likely. But this is, I like Musselman a lot as a coach, but I think he really blew it with the roster construction here of going for talent over fit. Because there's a billion 6'8", 6'9", 6'10" guys on this team. None of them outside of Smith can shoot a basketball. And that is a problem.
Is Kansas starting to get scary again? Will Warren as a contender?
Yeah, probably. I mean, so it goes for me to show how good Bill Self is that, you know, Tennessee and Wisconsin really revealed everything wrong without an offense in Atlantis. I think, you know, against Tennessee, they looked awful. Like, Tennessee completely shut down everything Jalen Wilson wanted to do. Grady Dick couldn't get anything off. And the day before, Wisconsin, who was far worse athletes, did a lot of the same. And it's a month later, and basically every major offensive issue is fixed. That's an amazing turnaround despite adding no one to the roster and losing Pettiford.
Well, they did add Bill Self back to the roster.
Well, yeah, Bill Self came back. Well, no, Bill Self was in Atlantis.
Yeah.
So, but I don't know if that's going to sustain itself. I still think the offense has a ceiling of finishing like 20th in KenPom. But given what it looked like a month ago, that's a success. They impressed me so much on defense. You saw a little bit of it against Tennessee and how many turnovers they forced, but you have to work really hard to score in these guys. Very active hands on defense. And the most impressive thing, Grady Dick looks a lot better on defense than he did in Atlantis. He had 5 steals against Indiana, was really active, really engaged. If he is going to be that engaged all season long, they're going to win the Big 12, and they're going to have a real shot at being the 1 seed. Though, I mean, the biggest problem Kansas has, unfortunately, is that they play in the Big 12 because you could be the 3rd best team in America and lose 6 games in the Big 12 just because it's that good. I don't know if anybody's going to be a 1 seed out of the Big 12.
Man, the Big 12 is just going to be a bloodbath, and also there is one thing out in the atmosphere that has not been made official. What's going to happen with a certain head coach in the Big 12 conference that I'm just going to go ahead and say should not be the head coach of that Big 12 team anymore.
Especially when they've been playing like just fine without him.
Well, that's not even like that doesn't even factor in for me.
Well, yeah. I mean, like just on a moral point.
Yes.
Unnamed man should be released from his head coaching duties effective immediately without pay.
And I would suggest folks read Dana O'Neill on the coverage of this matter for more questions and insight on said person. But
I just think to your point, sorry to interrupt, but like you have to resolve this soon, like one way or the other. You cannot. I think the worst thing Texas could do, and we'll get back on real basketball stuff, but after this is to let this linger into February, because right now you are letting it linger into January, and that is bad for a team full of people who committed to that coach, who committed to play in this style of offense and defense for that coach. You have to tell them one way or the other what the outcome is going to be.
What this tells me that the longer this goes is he's coming back.
Yeah.
Is my guess, is that he's coming back.
Which, I mean...
Great message.
I don't like it.
But, you know, cause it's just sports. What are... My bar is so low, and they did not reach that bar.
And it's also not like you could just, you know, hire somebody else who's very good. It's a high-paying job.
Yes, and I wonder too, like if this happens in the summer, or like do they make the move quick, and then they're like, we can get someone else in there before. They're like, oh, we think we might be able to. The cynical side of me is like they see it as like we can win the title this year. Yeah. Like this is a team good enough, and we make this move. Are we sacrificing a title? And you're like, this is gross. This should not be factoring into the equation. And this is all speculation on my part. But if I had to guess. As to what's going on and why this is dragging out, that would be my gut as to why that is. The 2022-2023 college basketball freshman class so far, Jeff Brazella wrote a really good piece on ESPN.com kind of outlining who's been great and who has not. Who among this list has stood out the most to you, Will Warren?
I'm going to give you my top 5 for the season so far. So number 1, Brandon Miller. I think that's pretty easy, right? Like, you obviously Wemby's going number 1. Seems like Scoot Henderson is number 2, and probably the Thompson twins 3 and 4. It's going to be a very weird season where there's not really going to be a college presence until the 4th or 5th pick. Miller probably should be the 4th or 5th pick. Like we've saw it against Gonzaga. We've seen it in most games Alabama's played. This is a legit guy. He has been a star for an Alabama team that's really needed it. Really enjoyed watching him play. Grady Dick, number 2. Kyle Filipowski for Duke, number 3. Bryce Sensabaugh for Ohio State. Really, really great player. I have been deeply impressed by what he has done so far. Ohio State, frankly, has come in well above what I expected them to be. Like, they look like a legit top 20 team. Sensabaugh looks like the Big Ten freshman of the year. Really impressed by them. And then Jarris Walker at Houston. He's in a weird position where you're going to be like a lottery pick, but you're like the 3rd option on your team just because everyone else is so much older than you and so much more experienced. But his commitment on defense is truly impressive, and he is very hard to stop at the rim. I think, as he continues to blossom a bit as long as the year goes on, it's weird to say this about a team that's number 1 in Ken Pom and Torvik, but Houston's ceiling kind of gets that much larger, which is frightening. I would say 6th is probably Case and Wallace. Wallace would be right in that periphery for me.
I would give a shout out to Jordan Pope, who's been really good for the Beavs, and the Beavers winning more games. I think they've already doubled their win total than from last year, which is just. They were the worst Pac-12 team in basketball last year. And, hey, they're at least a little bit better this year. And the Beavs, they get DJ Uiagalelei out of the portal, 5-star from Clemson. Everything coming up, they win 10 games this year, beat Florida down. Everything coming up, Beavers.
The best thing to ever happen to them is Mark Fox being the head coach of California.
Oof. And also we should... Clingan is fantastic for UConn. We have to mention, like, he's changed their ceiling.
If he played more minutes, I think he would factor in more here. It's kind of a weird, like, Travion Williams, Zach Edey situation where, like, either option is great, but you can't really play both at the same time between him and Sanogo.
Your craziest result in the last week in college basketball was which one, Will?
They've barely played any games this week.
Yeah.
We already kind of went over Kentucky, but I'm going to go back to last Wednesday because there are 2 amazing ones that happened. So obviously, we have to talk about Eastern Illinois, 31 and a half point underdogs beating Iowa. So As far as we know, and I looked into this on my own time, Jared Burson, who's formerly at ESPN Stats and Info, did as well. We cannot find a larger point spread upset in modern college basketball history than that.
Whew.
And it would be one thing if Iowa just sort of got shooting varianced out of the building, but like Eastern Illinois set a program record for dunks in that game with 8. They were completely dominating at the rim. Really, really scary loss for Iowa. I mean, I would be shocked if anybody has a worse loss this season. That's as bad as it gets for a team that wants to make the NCAA tournament, because Eastern Illinois entered that game 1-9 against Division I teams, not just good ones, any Division I team. And then my favorite result of the year, San Francisco 97, Arizona State 60. Good riddance.
Oh my goodness.
Good riddance. Get
the
these
haters
guys out
ball.
of here.
Will Warren, he loves Dan Hurley. Could not sell any more stock on Bobby Hurley. Just
out on them. But that being said, I think they've got a real shot to beat Arizona on Saturday. That's a very advantageous situation where they've got 10 days of rest. Arizona's already had one road loss in Pac-12 play. Would not be shocked at all to see ASU win that one.
What time is that game?
Great question. Let's find out. I think the ultimate result for them is Arizona State beating Arizona and then immediately losing 2 home games in a row to Washington State and Washington. That feels very spot on.
I could see Will Warren just ending his day with Michigan winning the college ball playoff game earlier with TCU. And then he's just got his hot cocoa and snuggled up with his weighted blanket. And he's like, all right, time to end my evening with a nice Arizona State loss over Arizona to end it. Just because I picked them to win. And this would be the most Arizona State thing to do.
Yes. That one is at 2 p.m. Eastern on Fox. By the way, tremendous matchup. Arizona number 1 in 2-point percentage. Arizona State number 2 in defensive 2-point percentage. Very rare you get one of those in the middle of the season.
I like it. We'll end on this. Your stat of the week is what, sir?
So this is going to cover something we've already talked about, but let's play a little game here. So I've got the net rankings in front of me. So these are today's December 29th. I've got 5 teams I'm looking at in particular, and I want you to tell me how many of the following teams rank ahead of Kentucky in net. And the teams are Florida Atlantic, Sam Houston State, Kansas State, Creighton, and Northwestern.
Sam Houston State. Kansas State. How many do I need?
It's just how many of those 5 are ahead of UK.
Okay, I got those 2. And who are the other 3?
FAU, Creighton, Northwestern.
And I'll just say Creighton. That's it.
The answer is all 5 are ahead of Kentucky.
Is Northwestern really ahead of Kentucky?
They are 38th and Kentucky is 40th. FAU actually number 1 among this group at 13th.
Wow.
Dusty May, man. Dusty May, that is a name to watch. The best thing about Mike White, by the way, is that every single one of his assistants are doing better than him.
Man.
Dusty May at FAU, Jordan Mincy at Jacksonville, a name to watch. Both really young guys. But yeah, that's what we're kind of looking at with UK. If the season ended today, they would be about a 10 or 11 seed. And, you'd prefer to not say uncharted territory, given that they've missed the tournament twice under Cal. But this would be, so they're 28th on Torvik right now. That would be their 3rd lowest ranking ever posted in a full season, ahead of those 2 times they missed the big dance. So, we talk a lot about UK is going to figure it out. And I still think they will to some extent. But this is a deeper hole to dig out of than they've had to dig out of in quite some time.
I like it. Will, what can the good folks check out from you over at statsbywill.substack.com? Subscribe today. It's the best $5. I want to say $5 a month.
$5 a month or $30 for a full season. The thing, so I will say on here, if you're a $5 a month subscriber, once it hits your 6th or 7th month, I just turn it to a free one for the next 6 months. So it's $30 either way. I don't like when sites charge less for the yearly per month versus the monthly. It should just be the same, just for consistency's sake. But anyway, Always Tennessee stuff on there. I, on the advice of a media member, am going to introduce SEC Weekly next week, where we go through like what happened, the SEC power rankings, who's leading the player of the year race, stuff like that. Probably one breakdown each week of like an offense or a defense. And then to go with that, if you're a new subscriber this week, you get a literal 7,000 word article on how each conference stands as we enter conference play. And then Friday, December 30th, a 2,500 word piece on the national landscape in both men's and women's hoops as we enter the new year. Which teams are the title favorites? Who's next in line? Spoiler for the women's section, South Carolina is going to house everybody this year. Those ladies are built different.
Yeah, there you go. Will, thank you as always, my friend. Happy New Year to you and yours. And I'm excited for what all is on the docket for us in 2023. Sounds crazy to say 2023.
Are you hitting everybody in this podcast with talk to you in 2023 or talk to you next year or some variation of that? Because that happened on 3 separate calls at my day job today.
I can't do it. No,
I don't do it either, but I am simply reporting what the populace has opted for.
Not surprising. Will, I will talk to you in 2023. See, it doesn't
talk
feel
to you
good.
Next year. Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Bye, Will.